So she is an analytical solution architect with a strong influence on information design. She's currently building a design team at the math company, and she's going to talk to us about designing for success, overcoming the adoption challenge in data analytics products.
Thank you. Hey everyone, good afternoon. And hello to everyone who is joining in virtually. So I'm Gomathy, thank you so much for the introduction. That was part of what I was going to cover too. So yeah, super excited to be here. It's such an honor to be presenting to all of you today. This community is where I learned a lot of different things and has actually made me who I am today. So super honored. So let's get started. Had to add a blank slide to show the animation. So what I wanted to talk about today is how do we build better data products. And this is actually part of what I do today, so shifting the theme quite a bit from the first half of the day for sure. So I think just starting off with my journey, right? So I started my career at the math company, which is a data science firm. So we work with Fortune 500 organizations to build custom data products to help enable their businesses better, right? And the first project that I worked on, I was lucky enough to get a project on performance reporting, which meant I got to play around with Power BI quite a lot, and I absolutely loved it, right? It was like an amazing playground where I could just, put different rows and columns and just test out what insights that I could possibly get. And of course, the community is amazing. So I used to watch a lot of different YouTube videos, learn a lot of visualizations, and even use Charticulator sometimes to create custom ones, right? From there, moved on to Power BI becoming a hobby for me. Started exploring a lot of public data sources to sort of understand what are the insights that I can gather. And that probably peaked at the time when I created a Harry Potter escape room on Power BI, right, which was probably when I realized that I probably need a new hobby. And that's pretty much when this community helped me quite a lot to explore the whole field of information design and data art, which I used in my organization, took that opportunity to represent every single employee in my company through each of that lotus leaves that you see on that screen. So that's a representation of the math company last year when we were much smaller. It was about 500 then, today we're about 1,200. Probably won't fit into that graphic, right? But I think all of these activities really got me wondering about, simplifying insights, getting people to take decisions fast. I'm showing them the best way to represent a particular chart or a particular data set, right? But what is the change that I'm driving, right? Especially for big businesses that we are working with. There's so many different complicated processes, so many different decisions that they need to take on a daily basis, and the scale of people is also huge, right? So how do we help them make that change to be able to do a lot more and empower them with the data that they have, right? So with that, I think I explored a very disturbing fact, I would say, about the number of organizations that invest in data science, right? And that's about 90%, which is amazing, right? We collect a lot of data, we get a lot of information, and people take decisions from it. But how many of them actually use it? That's just 15%, right? And that's crazy, because that's 1 in 6 organizations who invest in data science efforts who actually derive value from it, right? And being in an organization which is doing this for a living, this fact was just crazy for us, and we had to solve that, right? And even the products that see the light of the day probably take a very slow death as they go through time, probably in about 3 to 6 months, and they go through this journey of every single user trying to understand, why do I need this product, right? Very similar to all of us downloading an app from App Store, saying, don't I already have 3 other versions of this? Why do I need this one, right? So the initial hesitation phase. to the phase where you actually understand that this product works. And I really like a Todoist. I don't know if any of you use that, but that's an app that I use to track a lot of my tasks. And if you remember the first time you downloaded it, they would have asked you to create a new task and then check it off, right? And the reason they do that is to give you that product sort of onboarding experience to make sure that you understand what does this product help you with. And because you check that off, that sort of becomes a habit for you because you feel good and you're getting that reward of checking that off. And eventually you get hooked onto the product and you delete all of the other to-do apps that you have, right? So that's the revelation phase where you get to the aha moment. I stole it from service design, if any of you are from that field. And I thought that was a really good word to represent what we can really get people to. But most analytical products fail after that when they start everyday usage, when people start using it every single day to make decisions, to change things in their day-to-day processes, but they start facing some of the obstacles, right? Because we're talking about big organizations who already have probably 100 Excel sheets where they're doing all of these processes, which I'm now converting into a product which is completely new, completely foreign, and they need to learn it, right? But as they start using it every day, they realize that, hey, sure, this product is awesome. It has AI, it has ML, it's giving me 90% accurate results, but I still need to download it and then put it on another system, and that's very painful for me. So I'm not going to do that every day. Right? So that starts happening quite a lot in organizations. And the other problem is also errors, right? AI, ML models are prone to errors, and they do continuously improve over time. But when an error happens, what are we really doing with that error? Are we communicating it to the user that, hey, why don't you proceed with caution? Because this is the confidence level that we have for this particular value, is something that we need to think about, right? So when folks see an error, they use that value, something goes wrong, that's it. That's the end for your product, and they're not going to touch it again because it's not helping them in their day-to-day life, right? And finally, the stagnation phase, where folks figure out their own way to use a particular solution. Say, for example, download the results and then put it somewhere else, or do their own calculations on an Excel, and that's how they end up using these products as well, right? So this was really where we wanted to deep dive, because this is not really the change that we want to influence. It's not the way that we should be helping organizations to make such decisions, right? So let's deep dive into why this happens, right? And this is just probably a very small illustration of what really happens. But let's assume you have a data analytics team who's sort of building multiple different products for businesses to consume, right? It's going to be of very different formats, like a dashboard or a simulator where you can do planning and test out what the forecast is going to be like if, say, the temperature changes, and beer sales actually changes quite a lot if the temperature changes, right? To Excel reports for folks who are comfortable with that, to, of course, presentations as well, right? And all of these are being consumed by a very different set of people with very different characteristics, very different use of that particular information as well, right? From a VP of merchandising who needs to take care of all of the different brands, all of the different categories, and he needs complete visibility of what's going on the ground, which he needs to get from his team, right? And he could be a very collaborative person, doesn't necessarily have to be someone who says, I'm the one who takes decision and you do it, but rather someone who speaks with his team, takes decisions along with them, but might not be too data literate as well, right? To, say, a category manager who understands that it's very important for her to take data-driven decisions and needs like simulators to do day-to-day planning, to a data scientist who is extremely comfortable with data. He knows where it's coming from, what is the accuracy, what is the confidence, everything, right? So he's someone who's going to use it quite a lot and probably wants a way that he can build his own Power BI dashboard or a Tableau dashboard or an Excel sheet itself, right? So all of these folks have very varying needs, and I'm sure you can understand that there's just 3 of them there, and an organization has like thousands of them, right? And how do they use it is, again, a very different story, right? You take data, go to a monthly review with the leadership, with the CXOs, to sort of show them that this is how you've progressed. Or it could be with your brand managers to sort of understand on a weekly level, how are things changing and how can we improve, which is more collaborative, right? Which you can just put it quickly on a PPT or an Excel and just take it. But to your leadership, it's a completely different story, right? It needs to be narrative, it needs to have findings, it needs to have insights, it needs to have a lot of backing. Right? So this is one sort of end of the spectrum. Let's talk about the processes as well, right? I'm not going to get into details, but this is actually a real example of one of the clients that we were working with and the kind of planning and merchandising processes that they had. And this is probably a synthesized view, so you can imagine how complicated the whole planning process is, right? So from the people and the way that they use it to the kind of processes that they have, everything is super complicated, and they have very different needs, which we need to start catering to, right? So now to the answers, right? How do we really design for change, right? So what we have realized is following a very clear 3-step process. And this is also our way of what design is and how can we use that in our world to enable businesses better, right? The first one is how can you make sure everything that we build is functional and business driven, right? Because this is a B2B world. You can't really understand users and satisfy their needs, but you also need to push people to make sure that they're doing more. And that's usually with the leadership who have a vision of where they want to go to and how they want to get there, right? So balancing the user needs with the stakeholder vision becomes extremely critical. 2, how to make sure it's simple and customized to users. And I like using the example of a microwave oven because I don't think any of us have used all of the buttons on there. It's probably just 2 of them. But it's complicated. And trust me, if there is a new feature, I'm pretty sure we're going to go buy it. But are we really using it? We don't know, right? So the best way to go about it is how do we make sure it's simple and customized to users? And finally, there's an interesting one, right? Which is about how can we be expressive, right? How can you make sure your product speaks to the users and the people that it needs to cater to? Right? And how do we make sure it communicates value through that process and they understand that this is exactly how this product is going to help me and that's why I'm going to use it, right? So now we're going to deep dive into every single pillar and, skip through. The first step is really to understand what are people going to do with the insight that I'm giving them, right? This is just a very ugly doodle that I did. But say, for example, you're building a dashboard for a VP of marketing, right? How does he take note or summarize the findings from that particular dashboard? And what is the next step that he takes? Maybe he goes to the brand managers and asks them, is this data right? Am I seeing the right thing? Is this refreshed? Or even just asking what happened here, because I don't see that your performance has been good, right? From there, synthesizing all of that insights to a presentation to take it to the CXOs, right? So that's going to be a PPT format, it's going to be narrative, it's going to be talking about what has happened so far, right? And also understanding the setup of how these products are being constructed. It could be analytics team who's sort of building products for, say, a sales, a merchandising team, so many different teams, but they haven't lived the life of a sales team, right, or a merchandising team. So the problem definition itself could have been wrong, and maybe we could do better there as well, right? And that's exactly where a lot of UX processes come into picture. UX research, to be specific. There's no better answer than asking questions and asking good questions. So this is just a quick sample of a question, list of questions that we asked this particular client of ours to understand what are the top 5 questions that you need answers for from this dashboard, right? So that I can design it in a way that it makes sense for you, right? 2, of course, customer journey maps, user personas, all of those are extremely extremely helpful because of the complicated nature of organizations that exist. Two, the simple and customized to users is probably the one that all of you folks are extremely aware of. Just taking a dashboard, right, I'm sure looks probably okay, does its job, but could be a lot better, right? From the different colors on the KPIs to the kind of visual that it has. World map is good, but it takes up a lot of space, and it only shows the highest and lowest of a particular metric, right? Which might not make sense. To the chart that you see at the bottom, which is extremely hard to comprehend, and it's just very difficult for me to understand because it shows you the value, and then it shows the last year and the year before, which is a bad way of representation, right? So how do we make sure that the information flow is also good for the respective users? This, again, might be extremely simple because we're talking about one user, but imagine this across 20 different users, 20 different personas that we possibly have, right? To the redesigned dashboard, just wanted to flash this a little bit to sort of talk about only 3 KPIs and then deep dives across different categories and a very different way of really consuming the insights to make sure that you know the number and you also know the distribution across, right? All right, go on to the next section, which is how can we be expressive and communicate value as well, right? So this is probably the one that has worked really well for us in terms of how do we make sure we're onboarding users the right way onto these products. And there is a lot of work that we need to do and not just say dashboard launched and go start using it, but actually try to understand who are the people who will be with us on this journey, who will be that innovator for us, who will test it out and see what works, what doesn't work so that we can iterate. And finally, you know, the early adopters and the late majority, all that technology curve itself is a good way for us to understand who are the people who will like it, love it, and how can we keep improving it as well, right? Finally, building a brand is again very important. I'm sure all of us know, say, Nike or Adidas, and we resonate with those brands because it speaks to us on what they represent. Imagine the same thing for the product that you're building, and imagine seeing that identity in the organizations that you work for, where you remember, hey, this is a tool that can help me, maybe I should go check it out, right? So how do you build that recall value also becomes really helpful when we're trying to build that brand as well, right? From there to the onboarding journey, we like calling this a 4E process. How do you excite users to tell them, hey, this is how it's going to help you. It's going to save 20% of the time that you're spending today. That's going to attract people in the first go, right? To setting expectations, very critical in the AI ML products that we're building because we need to be extremely clear of what it can do and what it cannot do so that we're using it the right way. To educating them through a product navigation tour or any other supporting material to make sure that they're empowered to use it the right way with, of course, FAQ documents, user manuals, and so on, so that they know when to use it, where to use it, and how to use it, right? So with this onboarding journey, it again, I wish it ends there, but it doesn't, right? How do we keep evolving and sustaining the value also becomes critical, right? So tracking usage and defining clear goals and objectives of what we're really trying to do with the solution through an organization goal or a team goal also helps adoption of these products. And of course, all kinds of tool integration that ends up happening as well, right? And there are 2 main things that I just want to call out here in terms of recovery experiences. Error messaging is something that we take for granted, but just a very clear, concise, and trustworthy error messaging actually works really well, right? To say manual feedback or just calling out like, you know, low confidence scores are all different ways that we can enable trust and make sure that works. And of course, finally, the brand recall value that I already spoke about. We've used a lot of different ways to make sure that that stays through flyers or testimonial videos, to, of course, different games and even merchandise, where we created like a small mascot so that people remember that this sort of exists, right? So with that, just wanted to call out that these are different ways that we have explored, and some of them have worked, and some of them we are still adapting and learning, of course. But this has really helped our clients, work towards success and make sure that they're getting the value that they need out of the analytical outcomes. And really, what I wanted to say is, I know we're working towards simplifying, say, insights or figuring out the best data visualization, but there are a lot of different outcomes that I really think that we would be excelling at, right? For example, creating the most customized solution, or to onboard users onto a platform, because all of us are already at that intersection of art, design, and of course data science as well through data. And I really think that a lot of these outcomes that you would see over here is something that you would already be doing. So combining all of them through the work that you're doing today could really help businesses evolve a lot better. All right, so with that, thank you so much. This is just a quote that I like, and would love to connect with all of you after this. Thank you.
I was actually curious, the very last slide, you were talking about varying needs. I noticed that you didn't talk that much about context, for example, cultural context.
Yes.
Is it important too? Is it, it's also in your process?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of folks spoke about it before that as well, right? And then we've been very careful about colors as well, because we have customers all across the globe. And of course, in China, red is a color of good luck. So that means I don't put a red, bad value in red. So a lot of those things become extremely critical in the products that we're building as well.
Yes. Do we have questions here from the virtual audience too? Not yet? Okay. Oh, no, one there.
Hi, my name's Ben. I'm a data visualization developer from Philadelphia. I'm curious to get your thoughts on designing dashboards in particular that meet the needs of different stakeholders, and having one dashboard that fits all their needs versus, maybe you take in a team ID when they log in, and maybe you could talk a little bit about like development costs, trade-offs between the two options. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a very tough one. And then that's why I spoke about, balancing a stakeholder vision is extremely important, especially when we're building these dashboards. So the most successful programs that I would say we've run is where we've standardized different levels. For example, a level 1, level 2, level 3, where the level 1 is mostly for executives, and the level 2 is for a level little below that for, say, brand managers, and level 3 is for data analysts, and then so on, right, who can explore. So you seem 3 to be the magical number, if you will, and that has worked out really well for us, and also enabling, say, for example, a data model just for people to explore, and that's also worked out quite a bit in terms of making that happen, right? But 3 is a good number to start with, and then of course as you add new applications and new sort of insights, then it becomes important. Yeah, thank you.
We had a question from the back, exactly.
Hello. There is one example that you gave at the beginning that I think it's an important one, when you have designed very carefully a dashboard and then the user finds an error. And normally it's not a dramatical error, it's just something in the logic that changed and you were not aware of it, so you couldn't really maintain it. But that seems kind of a breaking point when they don't trust it anymore and it becomes a crisis and all the work is for nothing. So how would you handle that? Thank you.
Yeah. I'm afraid I don't have a better answer than starting with them first. That has really helped us sort of understand what they truly want. And honestly, the first question, I'm sure we ask a lot of questions to understand what are the kind of insights that you would want, but we also ask them, what would make you stop using this product? Of course, not in that same way, but trying to find out the friction points and the reasons of why mistrust could happen is also part of our research process to make sure that the product sustains for a very long time and we continuously evolve. I'm afraid I don't have a better answer, but that's one of the questions that we also ask in the beginning.
Okay, one question from the virtual audience.
Yeah, from online, there's a question from Patty Young. What would be your recommended next step if you have a dashboard that does not have a lot of usage?
Right. I think the first job is already done in terms of identifying that it's definitely not being used, right? The next step is, of course, starting from the beginning of understanding who is the recommended audience in the first place, right? And then why do they not use it? And that's usually the first thing that we do. We just think of it as a retrospective where we go understand why did you need this product in the first place, right? Is this because you had a new data source coming in and you just wanted to explore what are the insights without knowing who is going to use it, or what are the questions that they would get answers for? So just clearing and defining the expectations of what they want from that exercise has actually set a lot of things right. Even saying things like, hey, this is all we can do today, but if you give us this information or if you need this insight, we'll be enabling that for you in the second phase or so on, has actually changed the way people look at things because they feel like they're part of that process. And that's another thing that I forgot to call out in terms of co-creation with your stakeholders. Right? We like calling this the IKEA effect. I'm sure all of us have faced it because we built it and then we feel extremely connected to it. So a lot of UAT is a lot of just asking questions and understanding what they need feels like they're part of that process and they're one of the product managers or owners, if you will, with us. And then that's sort of like a hack that sort of helped us drive a lot of adoption as well.
We have time for one more question, two more questions if they're quick. Okay.
There's another online from Mandy Spoutman. How do you convince users to put in time and effort on top of their own high workloads to learn about a new data product?
Yeah. Which is why the third step becomes extremely critical, right? In terms of communicating the value of what is different in this product, which is going to be the USP, and why can you throw away the rest of the products that you're currently using today, right? That's the toughest part. Building it is probably the easiest, right? But that is where we do a lot of different workshops, and those posters and that education that we spoke about calls out the most attractive message, if you will, to the different sets of people. Sometimes we even send individual emailers to people to give them the message that they want to hear as well, to make sure that they're extremely attracted to the product. And trust me, the toughest job is just getting them on the product for the first time, right? As long as you get them there and you have a well-designed product journey and they know what they can get from there, you're good. So just that initial excitement phase, I think really helps, and clearly identifying the USP of why they need to use it becomes critical. Yeah.
Anyone else? One more? Okay. Our virtual audience is very...
Yeah. This is from Marta Pinto. Have you implemented these steps in a new product? Do you know how much success it got? And how did you track this exactly?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a completely different topic that I can talk for 20 minutes. It's extremely critical for us to measure the success as well, because our clients are actually giving us their time and the time of a lot of different business stakeholders to actually sit in this workshop, understand the requirements, and also sit with us for the product launch and it's a lot of time, right? So we follow a really good adoption measurement framework, if you will, which tracks each of those steps that you spoke about. Just to give you a very simple example, the excitement phase, right? Very simple Outlook poll to sort of ask, hey, are you excited? Is a very simple way for people to just click on and say yes, and that's a very just a very simple measurement of how many people are interested in looking at your dashboard, right? From there to a very complicated usage tracking, of course, in terms of dashboards of how much time, what is the session time, which I'm sure all of you would have heard of. But even in terms of education, where in fact in one of the workshops we designed like a game, if you will, which had like 5-6 questions, and we gave them points based on the first person to answer that question. So in one go, they actually learned how to use the dashboard and also knew what questions to find answers for and also knew where to find it. So that was like a very simple way for us to also understand how we can make sure adoption is being measured.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our time is up, but it was great. Thank you.